Instructor for myself, I'm comfortable taking risks when I'm leading the class. Mm-hmm. But when I'm sharing the class, when I'm opening up to another person's vision, then taking and still being able to take those risks is a challenge for me. Mm-hmm. Because to a certain extent, it's a challenge in the same way we're asking the students to be challenged. It's a loss of control. We're unable to determine how the course of the class is going to go. And we have to be able to listen. I have to be able to listen to another narrative, your narrative, on the process that everybody's sharing, and be able to contribute without getting in the way.
Right.
And I wanted to see how deeply we could go into that direction, and not as just an addition of your vision and my vision, but to come up and discover a third vision that potentially would be not just a sum of the parts, but actually a larger vision that contained us both, but wasn't necessarily either mine nor yours, but a third thing.
You know, my feeling was like the first year when we did this thing, it was we were both running on very much parallel lines.
Yeah.
And there was not much disconnect. So they were pretty much on the same line, different applications, different practices, approaching the same thing from different angles, but everybody could get along with it. Last year we again started with the parallel lines, but they started to come together. Yeah. This year for me there was much more of a weaving together of these lines, and in that weaving, the kind of the differences between your approach, my approach, your style, my style, your physical expression, my physical expression of Aikido, started to blur or blend together, and then that common thing actually it gave it more permission.
Right.
The common, I mentioned this before, there's the common ground. Right. We're meeting more on a common ground, and it's not that the common ground is getting bigger, but it's going deeper on the common.
I think that the challenge is in the essence of Aikido itself is how do we connect with another person in such a way that we maintain our integrity but allow ourselves to be touched.
Right.
By the other.
Exactly. In just the regular training.
In the regular
training context.
Yes, exactly. And that's in terms of a jiwaza, we have to let the borders fall.
Right.
And yet we're still autonomous, but we're also communal.
Right.
It felt like our separate voices were very clear in terms of what we were doing. And at other times, it was difficult to say who was saying what, and very difficult to say. Is this my perspective, your perspective?
Right.
Perspective?
Exactly.
And this, I think, was a very positive thing,
right.
Even though it felt very uncomfortable at some points in time. Like,
right.
whoa, wait a second.
But when it was uncomfortable, it's because we stepped into a new area.
Right.
We were stepping into uncharted territory, and it was
Right.
I mean, what we were asking the students to do was to let go of their reference
Yes,
points
right.
and enter into the unknown.
Right.
There were a few times where we actually had to let go of our
Yeah.
reference points and go into the unknown, and it was just kind of
Yeah.
shaky. And sometimes it didn't work. Sometimes, I mean, a few times, a few of the practices, just something completely new came
Right.
out of them,
Right.
and it was such an organic expression of the process, actually.
And I think I see that uncomfortable feeling as being a good sign. It's not as a negative. And yet there's still that, it's so easy to pull off something that we know.
Right.
But to take that step into that uncomfort zone and to step into that space where
Exactly.
we embrace the fact that we can't know, we don't know.
To getting to the point to where we can be comfortable with that uncomfortable
Yes,
feeling,
right, exactly.
and we can just allow it because that's the process. That's where it's taking us.
And to see that uncomfortable feeling is the signal that we're heading in the right direction.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. And it's what you were saying before, how the process of Aikido is two people coming together, two
Right.
energies coming together, in some type of, let's say, attack or conflict,
Right.
and coming out with some type of third way, or some type of harmony
Collective movement.
that's completely new. That's not determined
Yes.
by Ikkyo, Nikkyo,
No.
Sankhya, which is also fine. But
Right.
but what we're talking about is something different,
Right.
and it's I starting to see this emerging more when we're teaching side by side. It's as if what you're doing and what I'm doing are also these two. You can't really, in a way, competing agendas, but it's not like we're in competition for each other. But it's coming together in a way that's bringing out something completely
Right.
new, and it's greater than the sum of the
Right.
total.
Yeah. The larger sense which contains the two is has its own intelligence, its own movement, its own
Exactly.
its own, to a certain extent, direction.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for us to be able to discover that, for a person to discover that with another attacker in a partnership, in a training mode, we have to let go of the way we want things to be, the way we think things should be, in order to discover something which is larger.
Right.
And that's the same thing for us. We can't hold on to the projected sense of where we want to go if we're going to be able to discover something larger.
Right.
And we're in that state of free fall. And then
Right.
something creative comes up
Exactly.
and rises up to support us.
Right.
In that's where the discovery.
And the free fall happens when the free fall is transformed into actually flying.
Right.
Is the moment you realize that there's no bottom.
Right.
It's not. There's nothing to
Right,
fear down
right,
there. You're not going to smash
Right.
and crash and burn.
Right.
It's just flying. It's
free
flying,
fall.
and then
Right.
something completely new comes out of the relationship to it. And it's like when we talked about it the whole weekend. It's a shift of perspective. It's a shift of intention. It's a completely different attitude.
It's a faith. It's a faith in that uncomfortable feeling. It's a faith in that free fall.
That's the compass
Right.
point in a way.
And I think the autonomy comes in with our intention. It's like I want to wake up to a larger sense of who I am in my relationship to myself, in my relationship to the other, in my relationship to the collective, and there's a deep sense of deep recognition that intelligence is valuable. There's a certain amount of joy, creativity, but a larger sense of really truth, not just a personal truth, but the truth.
Right.
And whatever that may be behind Aikido, the truth of Aikido itself,
Right.
starts to become apparent, not in a way as an object, but it has its own voice, it has its own movement.
It's not something you can actually put your finger on.
No, it's
but
not
you can
something-
recognize.
Yeah.
And everybody can recognize
Right.
in the moment.
Right. And it's in that sense, in that recognition of that truth, that liberates the person. And says, wow, that truth came from within my experience. Not from a book, not from a teacher, not from a tradition. But in the moment of that uncomfortable vulnerability and that letting go, something comes up and supports me.
Right.